On the morning of June 19th, 1944, Major Robert Neman, a 32-year-old Marine tank commander, prepared to lead his men into a harrowing battle on the island of Saipan. As the commander of C Company, 4th Tank Battalion, he was already decorated with a Navy Cross for his actions in previous operations. But that day, he was preparing to face one of the most daunting and dangerous challenges of his career. His company was advancing across open terrain toward heavily fortified Japanese positions nestled 200 yards ahead. The enemy had constructed a formidable defensive line, embedding at least a dozen 75mm anti-tank guns in concrete bunkers. These were supplemented by mortar teams and machine gun nests, all carefully concealed within the volcanic rock. The temperature inside Neman's M4 Sherman tank climbed above 100 degrees as the armored vehicles rolled forward in formation. The heat was unbearable. Sweat drenched the uniforms of the men inside. As the lead tank surged forward with 11 others from the company, disaster struck. 70 yards into their advance, Neman's tank was hit directly by a Japanese anti-tank gun. The impact jolted him violently against the turret wall, and thick black smoke filled the engine compartment. The crew had no choice but to abandon the vehicle as machine gun rounds slammed against its hull. Neman escaped the crippled tank and sprinted under fire to another Sherman in his platoon. He climbed into the commander's hatch as bullets ricocheted off the armor. This second tank advanced a short distance before a landmine detonated beneath the left track, throwing the vehicle into a hard pivot. Neman was slammed against the gun breech with such force that he cracked 2 ribs. Immobilized and exposed, the crew once again had to bail out. He raced to a third Sherman just 20 yards away and took control. This time, with sheer determination, they punched through enemy lines. His gunner took out 2 machine gun nests and a mortar pit. The assault succeeded, but the price was high. By nightfall, C Company had lost 6 tanks and 14 tankers had been killed or wounded. The 4th Marine Division had landed on Saipan just 4 days earlier with a force that included 68 tanks. Within a week, nearly a third of its armored strength had been destroyed by Japanese mines and anti-tank guns. Neman recognized a disturbing pattern. The enemy had saturated the approaches to every defensive position with anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, along with improvised explosives crafted from old aircraft bombs. Although Marine engineers attempted to clear paths using metal detectors, they worked slowly and were constantly under threat from enemy fire. Tanks often exceeded the safe lanes and were lost to unseen mines. Something had to change. Back on Maui during the battalion's refit, Neman recalled an article he had read in an armored forces journal describing British mine flail tanks, vehicles equipped with rotating drums and chains that detonated mines ahead of the tank's movement. These specialized tanks, called Scorpions or Crabs, were proving effective in Europe. But in the Pacific, such resources were scarce. Equipment was either delayed, secondhand, or altogether unavailable. Determined to find a solution, Neman conceived a plan that would rely not on shipments from Europe, but on ingenuity, courage, and the resourcefulness of his Marines. While walking through the motor pool one afternoon, Neman noticed a damaged M4A2 dozer tank nicknamed Joker, which had been pulled from service after Saipan. It was diesel-powered and due for scrap. Nearby, parts were being stripped from wrecked vehicles in a boneyard of twisted metal. The sight sparked a bold idea. If they couldn't get a British flail tank, why not build one themselves? Neman convened a meeting with his officers and senior non-commissioned officers. Laying out a rough sketch, he described a vision of a Sherman fitted with a rotating drum and chains mounted on the front. The mechanism would beat the ground ahead of the tank, triggering any hidden mines before the tank reached them. Some officers were skeptical. Lieutenant Bob Reed, his executive officer, raised a critical point. How would they power the flail? A tank engine powered the tracks, but auxiliary systems were either battery-powered or manual. Undeterred, Neman declared they would figure it out. Gunnery Sergeant Sam Johnston, an experienced mechanic who had kept Shermans running under impossible conditions on Guadalcanal, volunteered to help. He was joined by Staff Sergeant Ray Shaw, the Chief Maintenance NCO. Between them, they had restored countless tanks using salvaged parts. Neman authorized them to begin work, granting full access to whatever parts they needed. Johnston and Shaw spent several days scouring wreckage for components strong enough to rotate at high speeds and survive repeated explosive shocks. Aircraft parts were too delicate, while tank parts were too heavy. Their breakthrough came when they discovered the intact rear axle and differential of a destroyed 2.5-ton truck. The axle was 6 feet long and featured a central differential, perfect for a rotating flail mechanism. With the help of welders from the 127th Naval Construction Battalion, a support unit known for their skilled craftsmanship, Johnston and Shaw built a heavy steel frame onto the Joker's front. The axle was mounted horizontally and chains were attached to it at regular intervals. When spun, the chains would flail the ground violently. To solve the power issue, Johnston scavenged a Jeep transmission and cut a 4-inch hole through the Sherman's frontal armor, an audacious move that would have led to disciplinary action in any other context. The drive shaft extended through this hole and connected to the flail mechanism. Inside, the Jeep transmission was linked to the Sherman's powertrain with gears and belts. The bow gunner would control everything using new levers to engage and adjust the flail. 3 weeks of intense labor transformed the Joker into something unrecognizable, a Sherman with a rotating steel death drum protruding from its bow. Chains 3 feet long hung menacingly from the axle. When Johnston tested the mechanism in the motor pool, it roared to life with a sound like thunder. The chains spun furiously, flinging dirt and rocks in every direction. The system worked, but nobody knew how it would handle live mines. With official permission, a test was arranged. Marine engineers laid captured Japanese Type 93 anti-tank mines in a mock field, deadly devices designed to destroy tanks and kill crews. Marines gathered to watch the first live run. The flail tank approached, chains spinning. The first detonation sent debris flying high into the air. For a moment, dust obscured everything. Then, astonishingly, the tank emerged intact. It continued forward, triggering mine after mine. By the time it reached the end of the field, the flail mechanism had withstood multiple explosions and cleared a safe path without casualties. However, a problem was discovered. Shrapnel had pierced the underside of the differential casing. Although the mechanism was still functional, the damage exposed a critical vulnerability. Shaw and the Seabees worked swiftly to fabricate an armored box around the differential using 1/4-inch steel plates. A second test confirmed the solution. Explosions marred the armor but failed to penetrate. The concept had proven itself. Word of the success spread, and a formal demonstration was scheduled for senior leadership of the 4th Marine Division. But on the morning of the demonstration, disaster struck again. Johnston, the only man capable of operating the flail mechanism, was found incapacitated after a night of heavy drinking. With time running out, Neman trained a corporal in just 10 minutes. Remarkably, the young Marine executed the demonstration flawlessly. Explosions rocked the field as the flail cleared the mock minefield. The officers were impressed. The division commander asked Neman how many could be built by February. Neman replied that they had only one. The general promised authorization and support for more if the prototype succeeded in combat. Iwo Jima was the next target. Intelligence warned of a heavily fortified island with an estimated 21,000 Japanese defenders. They had prepared a network of tunnels, bunkers, and interlocking fields of fire, abandoning beach defenses for a more insidious strategy. The flail tank, despite its unorthodox design and diesel engine, was assigned to C Company. Sergeant Rick Haydex, a seasoned combat veteran, would lead it into battle. On February 19, 1945, American forces launched the assault on Iwo Jima. The beaches, composed of fine volcanic ash, proved treacherous for tanks. Vehicles bogged down quickly. By mid-morning, Haydex's flail tank made it ashore and began pushing inland through the black sand. The tank's added weight in the front helped it avoid getting mired like others. At approximately 1400 hours, Haydex observed a series of red flags planted in the ground, markers that he interpreted as signs of a minefield. He received permission to activate the flail and move toward them. What he did not realize was that these flags were not minefield markers, but pre-registered coordinates for Japanese mortar teams. The moment the flail tank crossed into the target zone, enemy mortars opened fire with devastating precision. Rounds exploded around the vehicle, and Haddox ordered the driver to accelerate. The Sherman struggled in the soft ash. With its bow sinking under the flail's weight, it became immobile under a storm of incoming fire. Despite efforts to reverse and disengage the flail, the tank was stuck. Another Sherman moved in under fire to tow it to safety. The flail tank survived, damaged but operable. Yet it was clear that the volcanic terrain made the flail impractical. Its additional weight hindered mobility, and engineers with metal detectors were more effective despite the risks. That brief combat debut would be the flail tank's only mission on Iwo Jima. Nevertheless, its development marked a significant achievement in battlefield innovation. The battle itself lasted 36 grueling days. Nearly 7,000 Marines were killed and over 20,000 wounded. Japanese resistance was nearly absolute. Only 216 prisoners were taken alive from a force of 21,000. The battle would be remembered as one of the fiercest in Marine Corps history, and for producing 27 Medals of Honor. Major Neman survived the war and received a Navy Cross for his heroism on Saipan. He left the Marine Corps in 1946 and transitioned to civilian life, eventually building a successful career in the lumber industry. He lived until 2003, passing away at the age of 91. Although the flail tank he built on Maui did not achieve widespread use in combat, its legacy endured. The concept was sound, and future military engineers would refine it. Modern mine-clearing vehicles still employ rotating flails, born from the ingenuity, desperation, and courage of a Marine major who refused to accept unnecessary loss and believed that even scrap metal could save lives.